Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of my very first podcast, a fangirls. No, fuck. What is it called? Hold on. Let's talk. A fangirls podcast. I might need to make that you know what? No, I'm gonna stick with it. Welcome to the first episode of Let's Talk, a fangirls podcast with your host Katie Gleason, aka starksnova. That's me. Hi. This is so weird. This is not at all the kind of content I usually make, and this is very new to me, but I am so excited to get started. For those of you who do not know who I am, my name is Katie. I am an acting student in New York City. I am a cosplayer. I'm a content creator, mainly on TikTok, but I am also just a huge fucking nerd, and I really just wanted a place where I could come and yap about all of the things I love and all of the fandoms I'm in and all of the characters and franchises that I love so much. So that's what this is. This is purely for my own entertainment, and hopefully there are people who can get entertainment from it as well. But this is purely for my own sake. I used to do videos on my TikTok. I used to do like smaller video essay type stuff, but it was very like heavily scripted and heavily edited, and it just became something that became very stressful and tedious for me to do. So this is kind of my new solution. I want this to be very chill, stream of consciousness vibes. I want this to be something that you can put on when you're on your way to work, when you're doing your makeup, when you're, eating lunch, like that kind of vibe, just hanging out and talking about the things that I love. Starting with probably my favorite thing in the world, which is Marvel. If you couldn't guess if you're watching the video on YouTube, you'll understand what I mean, but to my audio listeners, to my left, I have an Iron Man helmet, an arc reactor, Tony's glasses, and to my right, I have a plush Iron Man. So if you didn't read the title, you would have been able to very quickly guess what it is I'm about to talk about. But MCU, that's a broad topic, but there is so much that we could talk about right now. So much content has just come out. Thunderbolts came out last week. Doomsday stuff is coming out. I don't even know where to start, but we're going to try to tackle it today. So without further ado, let's talk about it. Thank you to Dan and Phil Beats for that royalty-free lo-fi that I could use for my intro. Very much appreciate it. I've actually been streaming them a ton recently, and I was listening to that, and I was like, oh my god, finally, I can have a little theme song for my podcast. So let's just jump right in. Let's get started. This will obviously not be the only time I talk about the MCU on this podcast. In fact, no matter what the topic is, I'm sure Tony Stark will come up in some capacity. But I thought it would be a good way to start by just kind of talking about the MCU as a whole, talking about my favorite projects, my least favorite projects, the direction I see the MCU going, how I feel about what's currently going on in the MCU, and just kind of, jumping right into that. If you're not familiar with my content, Marvel is my main fandom. Marvel is usually the main thing that I cosplay and is kind of the thing that I never shut up about. So it only felt right to start it off this way. But let's start back at the beginning. Back when I first became a fan of the MCU and of Marvel. It feels kind of crazy that this was my experience, because I feel like mostly when I talk to people, it's people that grew up with superheroes and have always loved Spider-Man and like have been here since the first Iron Man. And I'm very envious of that experience because that was not mine. I watched my first MCU movie, my first Marvel movie. In fact, I think it was my first superhero movie ever, in March of 2019, which was the month before Avengers Endgame came out. And like, now that sounds crazy to say, but growing up, I was never super like into the whole superhero thing. I don't know. I think the main reason is like, I've always been very girly, and the superheroes, I didn't see any pink or any sparkles or any princesses, and then I didn't care. And quite frankly, I do stand by that. There should be more pink, sparkly superheroes. But, and it was also, I was a kid in the early 2000s, and the toy stores used to be like the boys section and the girls section. And I was always I never like thought I had to follow that rule, I guess. I was always just a lot more interested in the stuff that was quote unquote for girls. But it just never really grabbed my attention, I guess. And I also, I have always been very sensitive to like gore and violence and all that kind of stuff. Even like I couldn't watch anything that even had any sort of like combat until like high school. I think the darkest thing I watched was Once Upon a Time, which, do not worry, there will be a whole episode about Once Upon a Time, probably my second episode, because it is my favorite show to ever exist. But that's not what we're talking about today, Katie. Please stay on topic. But yeah, it was just never like anything with combat or action made me super anxious, and it was just never anything that really grabbed my attention. But I was on Stan Twitter back in the day. And it was, around the time that like Infinity War came out, Marvel Stan Twitter was like at its peak, and people were constantly talking about Avengers Infinity War. And what was really interesting to me about it was that this was the first time I had heard of a movie where the villain won. I think I remember that being what like initially grabbed my attention, because everyone on Twitter was talking about it. I didn't care about spoilers because they were movies that I didn't have any particular interest in. I didn't really know anything about. But I found it really interesting that in a superhero movie, they lost. I was like, that's really interesting just from like a narrative writing perspective. And then the other thing that really got me into it was my brother. My brother is about 2 years older than me, 2.5 years older than me. And he went to see Infinity War and was just raving about how amazing of an experience it was and how hype everyone was and how cool it was. And I was kind of like, okay, like everyone on Twitter is talking about it. You're talking about it. It must be decent. Like maybe I'll try and get into it. And I kept saying that and it just never happened. And then a little bit before Endgame came out, he was like, look, if you want to get into Marvel, now is the time to do it. You have to do it now. And I didn't really understand why back then, but thank God he did that, because I cannot even imagine. Like, I am so heartbroken that I wasn't in the fandom for Infinity War or any of the earlier stuff. Like, I can't even imagine being in theaters for the finale, like for the end of Infinity War, not knowing what was going to happen. That must have been insane. So I'm so grateful that I got to be there for Endgame and have that experience and have the, the opening weekend experience. That was my first opening weekend Marvel movie, was Avengers Endgame, which is crazy. But I finally was like, okay, fine. And it was March of 2019, and we sit down to watch Iron Man 1. And like I have mentioned, again, so if you don't know me, if you don't know my content, or like if you don't know me in person, and if you haven't picked up on it yet, I am very obsessed with Tony Stark. Tony Stark is my favorite fictional character to ever exist. In fact, I think there is going to have to be at least one, if not multiple, separate episodes just about him, because the reason I'm not starting off talking about RDJ as Doctor Doom is because I fear if I start with that, I will not be able to stop, and that will be all this episode is about, and I do want to cover other things. But, trust me, it will be brought up. I have many thoughts. But I have to, reel it in first. But yeah, I am a, diehard Iron Man fan. I have an Iron Man tattoo on my arm. He is my favorite character from any piece of media ever. But when I first watched Iron Man 1, I remember this so vividly. I sit down and, we watch the first, 10 minutes of the movie. And I look at my brother and I say, are you making me watch a movie about a straight conservative white man? And I think I said, I'm not going to like this. Because, and in my defense, you watch the first little bit of Iron Man 1, and it's, pre-development Tony. He's being an asshole. It's very, the aesthetic is very, military and, men. I didn't think it would ever be my vibe. Flash forward to 6 years later. By the way, 6 years is crazy. And it is, one of my favorite movies to ever exist. But when, before you really know what development Tony goes through, I did not think I was going to like him at all. I do remember the exact moment that genuinely, my brain chemistry changed. And I know that, I remember something in me, I'm a dramatic-ass person, but I swear I remember, feeling something. It's the scene in Iron Man 1 when he's at the, gala, and Christine comes up to him with the picture of Golmira, which is the small town that Jensen is from. And Tony says, I didn't order a hit on Gomira, she says, well, no, I didn't approve any shipment. And Christine says, well, your company did. And he says, well, I'm not my company. And then that's when he starts to really, like, that's what really starts to kind of fuel the fire for, like, realizing how much destruction he has caused. And, you know, that's when he's about to, like, officially debut the Mark III and go to Gomira. And, like, I just remember being like, oh my God, I think I kind of love him. I was like, oh shit, I kind of love him. And I felt so bad about it because at first glance, at the beginning of Iron Man 1, he is a misogynistic asshole. And I was like, wait, I kind of love him. And the rest is history. But yeah, I mean, I what I remember, and what I think what really did actually change when I watched that is that I had, as I'm sure many people did, and many people still do, a preconceived idea of what comic book movies were and what superhero movies were. And I thought it was a bunch of men in suits punching each other with, like, the one token hot woman and an explosion and big robots, and that was it. And now, I'm not going to lie, a lot of the early superhero movies are a bunch of men and one token woman and a lot of explosions. But what I was not expecting from a comic book movie was something that was so character driven and so, like, emotionally driven and so depth and, like, and so, like, in depth into character analysis. I was not expecting that because I didn't know that could be part of the genre. I didn't really know anything about the genre because I had never experienced it. But that's kind of, you know, the stigma and the idea that people who are not fans of superheroes have. And I just remember, like, I personally, and number one, I'm an actor, and so I very much watch things through that lens. But I am much more driven to, like, a very character-based story as opposed to, like, a very plot-driven story or, you know, very world-building heavy. Like, I am much more attracted to the character analysis side of things. And I think that's one thing that the Iron Man trilogy does incredibly well, is have it be a, like, very, very character-driven story first, as opposed to, like, for example, I love the Cap trilogy, and it's one of the best trilogies in the MCU, but it is plot-driven at its core. Like, the plot is the number one priority, and there are some great character moments within that, whereas Iron Man, the main focus is the character, and therefore the plot is affected. Which I don't know if that quite made sense, but I didn't realize that could be part of this. And I think what I really, then I immediately was like, can we watch the next one? And I became addicted very quickly. Let me finish, yeah, I'll finish the story first. Binged the entire MCU. I think I finished, like, the week before Endgame. And then saw Endgame opening weekend. And, you know, completely fell in love with the character of Tony Stark. Hyperfixation was so fresh. So, you know, when, like, fellow neurodivergent people, when you have a new hyperfixation, you're, like, in that honeymoon phase of, like, you're just getting to learn everything about it, and it's, like, so fresh and exciting. Yeah, that's where I was at. And then I watched Tony die. You know who my other favorite character is? Natasha Romanoff. What a fun movie for me. It was a really fun experience. No, it genuinely was. And it is, like, still one of my favorite memories. Because it was the first time I had never been in a movie theater where people were cheering before. And, like, so invested in what they were watching. And I think it changed my whole opinion on film, honestly. I was not nearly as interested. Did I forget to put earrings in? God damn it. That's not the point. I was not nearly as interested in film as I was before I started the MCU. I liked movies, but I didn't really watch many movies besides Disney and Barbie. And honestly, that hasn't changed much. Just add Marvel and Star Wars to that list. But I don't know. The MCU did kind of open my eyes a lot to the possibility of what film could be. And the whole interconnected universe and so many different types of stories within the same franchise and the same genre, and the fan response to being in that theater. I had never experienced film like that before. And say what you will about the MCU, but it has been able to do something really special with that. And that's actually what I wrote my college admissions essay about. And I got into quite a few schools because I'm an actor. I'm writing about like my love for film and what sparked me wanting to be a film actor. And like, it's that. It was the MCU. Like, and I don't know. Like, it sounds cheesy, but it's genuinely true. Well, number one, cosplaying Marvel is what really kind of got my account off the ground. Excuse me. And it's how I met so many of my closest friends. Like genuine. I've gotten so many incredible opportunities because of it. Being in the Marvel fan base has genuinely changed my life so much. But it also, when this was happening, like when I watched all of the movies for the first time, I was going through a really, really difficult time in my life. And I think having this universe to escape to really, really helped me. And I think it's part of why I have such a strong connection to it. And I'm so protective over the characters that I love so much. And with that said, let's talk about some of the most recent projects. The first one being Thunderbolts. There's a transition there, I swear. Number one, because it just came out last week and it's at the forefront of my mind. Number two, because I need to address the new Avengers thing. That's where the transition came in. Me being very protective over my characters, that's where it comes in. But I was lucky enough to go to an early screening of Thunderbolts, which is so cool. And so like I saw it a day early. I was one of the earlier groups to see it, and I absolutely loved it. I was really hesitant going in because when Thunderbolts was first announced, well, number one, I don't remember when it was announced. It was announced a while ago, but it was announced at the same time as like a million other projects, which is awesome. Like I have not, and I think because I'm such a like quote unquote new fan, at least in comparison to a lot of other people, while I do understand the like Marvel fatigue and like there's too many projects, I have never stopped being invested and like loving it. There have been projects that I've liked more than others, but I think there has consistently been a lot of really great shit for the past few years. And like that, again, that might be because it was like post Endgame was my first time being in the fandom for releases. So it was like, and like, oh my God, there's so much Marvel coming out. This is wonderful. I didn't realize how weird that was. Other than the fact that I had to wait a long time in between Far From Home and Black Widow, but COVID made that very different. I didn't quite realize how strange it was to be getting so much new Marvel content so quickly because I had binged all of it and that was all I really knew. But I've never been part of the like Marvel is dead, new Marvel sucks train. It's like people are saying we're so back. I never left. I've someone play Right Where You Left Me by Taylor Swift. I've been here. But when Thunderbolts was first announced, again, it was announced at the same time as like a lot of other stuff. And it felt I remember seeing the lineup and it felt like to me it was like, "Hey guys, we've introduced all of these characters and we told you that they would all be important. And we're going to do it in one movie. All of these loose ends that we set, what if we just did them all right now?" Like, and that means you have to watch all the TV shows. Like, that's kind of what it felt. In fact, what was the first Thunderbolts lineup? Was it the same as what was in the movie? Will this stop recording if I Google? No, it's still recording. Okay, I don't remember if the Thunderbolts lineup was the same when it was first announced. Thunderbolts original lineup. But I remember thinking it was like, all right, they're just trying to, this is giving me the comic lineup. Which, by the way, the fact that there was no Zemo cameo is kind of crazy. Especially with like all the Falcon and Winter Soldier stuff. Doing Thunderbolts without Zemo is a little wild. I am also not someone who needs comic accuracy. But, okay, wait, hold on. MCU original lineup, yeah, it's the same. Is that Valentina? It is. Yeah, so the original picture they showed at Comic-Con is what it ended up being. Other than Taskmaster, which that is my one main complaint with the movie. I was so excited to get more of Taskmaster. I think that there's such an interesting story there. I am also a massive fan of the Black Widow movie, which I will talk more about in a minute, but I'm sad that they used Taskmaster on the marketing. I feel like if they didn't put her on all the posters, this would not be as big of a problem to me. I would still be upset. But like putting her on all the posters and then killing her after she's gotten 60 seconds is kind of wild. And it feels very disrespectful to the character, in my humble opinion. But anyways, they announced this. I've been trying to say the same story for like 10 minutes. They announced the damn Thunderbolts lineup, and I was like, okay, great. It just feels like they're trying to have a reason. Okay, I fully believe that having a show that doesn't, like one of the Marvel TV shows that doesn't necessarily have a huge impact on the overall MCU storyline is not only fine, but is actually great. Like, Moon Knight is one of my favorite things that the MCU has done in recent years. And it hasn't had to do with shit yet. And I think that's perfectly fine. I think that the whole idea that every show has to have some direct tie-in and direct influence on the overall plot is just limiting what we can do and is limiting how many unique projects we can get in the MCU, and is also just, I don't think every story needs to be a multiverse story. I don't think every story needs to be on this huge scale. I think we do need some street level stuff. We need some more separate, and like, I don't know. So to me, when I first saw this lineup, like I said, it was kind of like, okay, so they're trying to beat the allegations that they have a bunch of loose ends and a bunch of characters that they introduce but never bring back. That's what I thought Thunderbolts was going to be. And I saw the first trailer, and I wasn't sold yet. I was, mind you, like, they could put out, I don't know, 3 hours of fucking, like, Yelena Belova breathing, and I would give it 5 stars on Letterboxd. Like, I am overly, like, generous about how much I love everything that the MCU puts out. But I do still, I enjoy looking at it through a critical lens, just because I enjoy looking at media that way. I enjoy talking about what I like and what I didn't like, and what works and what doesn't, and that's just part of why it's interesting to me. But yeah, I wasn't sold by the first trailer, and then it was the second trailer that really sold me, because it was the one that was a bit more artistic. It felt a little bit less like Marvel trailer. It felt a little bit more like what the director's true vision probably was. And it was, then I was sold, then I was really excited for it. Moral of the story, I was wrong when I thought that this was just another, like, MCU putting a bunch of characters together, trying to, like, tie up loose ends that they set years ago. I thought it was fantastic. And actually, to me, like, again, I have thoroughly enjoyed pretty much every project since Endgame. There are, like, 2 I can think of that I really didn't like. And those 2 are Multiverse of Madness, which I actually didn't not like. I really liked it the first 2 times I watched it, and I watched it a 3rd time and finally was like, oh. I was just blinded by the fact that Wanda looks really cool. This is kind of not great. And the other one is Secret Invasion, which I don't even feel like I really have to say anything about that. I feel like it speaks for itself. But other than that, I've really loved a lot of what they put out. But Thunderbolts feels like the first one in a long time that had something it really wanted to say. I'm going to compare it to Brave New World, because that's the other most recent movie release, which I also really, really enjoyed. I thought it was very well done. I thought it had a lot of really great character stuff for Sam. Really cool fight scene. The fight choreo was fantastic. I really enjoyed Brave New World. Great performances from everyone. Like, I thought it was great. But it did feel a little bit like, okay, we need a Captain America movie. What can we do? As opposed to, and again, I wasn't in the writer's room, obviously. I don't know how this was done, but Thunderbolts felt like, I have this story I really want to tell. How can I best do that? And what I thought was a random assortment of characters that, like, had a dark past and a dark side and could kind of be dark versions of the Avengers actually ended up being a group of people that worked incredibly well together, and were a lot, like, every person being there was for a very specific story reason, and it all just felt very well thought out, and it had a lot, like, it felt like I have something I want to say with my art. Let me put all the puzzle pieces together to make that happen in the best way possible. As opposed to something like Brave New World, which felt like I have all of these puzzle pieces. How can I connect them in a way that could have a common theme and could make sense? And not to say that it wasn't deep in any way. Like, I mean, hell, having a corrupt president burn down the White House and kill someone with an American flag, it, like, come on. It's not like it's not saying anything. You know what I mean? And like, obviously all the stuff with Isaiah Bradley and it's continuing stuff that was happening in Falcon Winter Soldier. Like, there was a lot of really great shit there, but it didn't feel like that was the reason for the movie being made. It didn't feel like the people behind that movie were making it out of a passion for telling that, like, for having that specific story told. It more was like, we are going to tell a story about, like, we know we want it to be Captain America. There are some loose ends about Hulk. Let's throw those in there. How can we make this a coherent story that is important to his arc in some way? Thunderbolts to me just felt like, again, someone had something really clear that they wanted to say, and they said it in a way that was very well done and very smart, and didn't, like, preach at you or hit you over the head with it, but it was still, like, really, really heartfelt and beautiful in a way I really wasn't expecting. And I fucking loved it. I've only seen it the one time. I like to see, especially MCU movies, more than once. Especially because, you know, there's the fan build-up, and there's what the fans are expecting, and then you go into the movie and it's something different. And I feel like I can't give it, like, an accurate representation. Like, I feel like I can't have an accurate opinion on it until I see it a second time, simply judging it based off of what it is, rather than what I expected it to be. Specifically with Marvel, because, you know, there are so many theories and so many things that I expect things to be and whatever. So I've only seen it the one time. I think I only saw Brave New World the one time, too. Again, this is not Brave New World slander. I really loved it. That's just an example of, like, another recent one. What the hell else has come out recently? Like, now I'm like, movies-wise, what was before? Oh, Deadpool and Wolverine. Was that the only thing before Brave New World? You know, and Deadpool and Wolverine is the same way. Mind you, I love Deadpool and Wolverine. I saw it in theaters 4 times, 3 of which were in the same week. Like, I love that movie. But it felt like the process of it was, okay, we need another Deadpool movie. We want to bring him into the MCU, and we want to bring the X-Men back. What story can we tell with that? As opposed to, I want to tell this story, what characters would be best suited for that, what, you know what I mean? I'm repeating myself, but I don't know if I'm making sense. It's making sense in my brain. But it also is 11 o'clock at night, and I got up really early this morning. And, by the way, super off topic, I had my last final today of my junior year. I'm officially done my junior year of college. Thank you. I'm assuming you all stood up and applauded when I said that, so thank you so much. But yeah, I'm really tired. And I'm also, oh my god, wait, why the fuck am I not talking about this? Okay, I live in New York City, right? Which is amazing, and I've dreamed of that my entire life. They're filming Daredevil in New York tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. They're filming not far from me, and I'm gonna go. I don't know what I'm gonna see. Okay, let me wrap up about Thunderbolts first. I thought it was really, really... Oh my god, no, New Avengers. Wait, okay, fuck, there are too many things happening in my brain. What to start with? Daredevil will be quick. I'll talk about Born Again later. I have been to see Daredevil film Born Again Season 1 by accident. I went to the area because I knew that they put up the sign that was like Nelson Murdoch and Paige, and I wanted to see that, and I happened to go at the right time where they were filming the first ever scene in Born Again of Karen, Matt, and Foggy, and I was there for the confirmation that they were all coming back, because I was there for the rehearsal of that scene. It's like the first time that they were all 3 out together on set, which was insane. And then I went back to I don't remember if it was in Brooklyn or Queens, but I think it was still in Brooklyn. I live in Brooklyn. I think it was in Brooklyn. And I saw them filming a scene of the BB Report for season 2, which is awesome. I was hoping for, like, you know, seeing Charlie Cox or something, but it's still so cool that I get to see that stuff. And then I went a third time. I don't know if I was there at the wrong time or what, but no one was there. In fact, there was construction going on, but I fully thought it was a set load in. So I'm sitting there watching these random people move shit into a building. And I'm like, oh my god, what are they setting up in there? Daredevil, this is so cool. And it was just like random New York City construction. Anyways, I'm going tomorrow morning. I have no idea what they might film. If you don't know, the way that people find out about this is there are like no parking signs put up in certain areas saying that it's a film set or like a TV set. And there are code names that everything is under. So if you see a sign in New York City that says filming for Out the Kitchen season 2, that is Daredevil. Anyways, Thunderbolts, New Avengers. God. Okay, if you don't know me, I have ADHD, and that's going to be very apparent on this podcast. I'm going to do like a Once Upon a Time episode, and I'm going to talk about Tony Stark for an hour. I don't know how it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. I'm going to try very hard to at least stay on theme. At least if I'm talking about random shit, it's going to be related to the topic in some way. But, okay, yeah. It's not even a complaint with Thunderbolts. New Avengers popped onto the screen and I just got a pit in my stomach. And like, this is going to sound incredibly dramatic. And I know that. And I know that it sounds silly. As I'm sure many of you can relate to, the original Avengers have just such a, like, special place in my heart. And I'm sorry if you can hear that siren, by the way. Like I said, I live in New York. If I want to find a quiet time to film, it is never going to happen. But I care incredibly deeply about the original Avengers and their legacy, and specifically Tony and Natasha, and the fact that, you know, we're in the tower that Tony built and restored for them, and Valentina is pouring a drink at the bar like Tony did in Avengers, and you know. It just, I think it's really smart story-wise. Number one, obviously, as viewers, we're feeling that because, you know, there's no current main team in the MCU. And we're feeling that void, pun intended. And in universe, the civilians and the people of the world are feeling that void. And it makes sense that there are going to be a lot of people who try to be that. And I think that having the people who are kind of like the antithesis to the Avengers in a lot of ways, not all, but, you know, and at least to the public eye, these people who are, you know, criminals and whatever, as opposed to like Steve Rogers as Captain America, like, I think it opens up a lot of really interesting doors. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't make me sad. You know, that doesn't mean that it doesn't make me... Like, look, trust me, I know that Tony is dead. And I know that Natasha is dead. I know that the Avengers are no more. Every time I am reminded of it, I can't even fully put it into words. I'm just really sad. I'm not ready. You know, and again, that's partly because I haven't been here as long as a lot of other people have. The only movie I got with the Avengers was Avengers Endgame, and they never even fought together as the original six again. They haven't fought together as the original six since Age of Ultron. And which is a whole other fucking can of worms for how much I think they dropped the ball on the relationship between all the original Avengers. But I think I'm also kind of jealous of the treatment that, like, for example, there were a lot of really great, like, kind of found family moments in Thunderbolts that I thought were really beautiful. Obviously they're just getting to know each other, but I think they all understand that they have a shared experience in one way or another. And that has brought them together very naturally. Like, they understand that these people get them on a way that a lot of other people, on a level that a lot of other people wouldn't. Also, real quick, you know what I thought was really beautiful about Thunderbolts is that, you know, at the beginning they were all kind of doing like the trauma Olympics thing of like, oh, well, I had it the worst. I was raised in a lab. Well, I was raised by Russian spies, and I, like, you know, whatever. By the end of it, though, Bob was dealing with things that are very real to a lot of us, like abusive families and drug addiction and things like that, which at the beginning of the movie, a lot of the Thunderbolts probably would have said, oh, well, I had it worse. They simply just said, like, I'm sorry you went through that, and we're here for you. And I really loved that. I loved that everyone's different struggles with mental health, no matter, like by the end of they were not compared to each other. They all were important and valid in their own right, and they found comfort in understanding that they all have that shared experience. And I think that's really beautiful. But yeah, like, for example, okay, I love Yelena Belova so dearly, but I am, as a Natasha stan, like, I am jealous of how well she was written, because Natasha spent so long being so poorly written, and Yelena comes in right, like, honestly, I have a little bit of a, like, subconscious vendetta against Yelena. Nothing against her, absolutely nothing against Florence Pugh. I worship the ground that woman walks on. I think she's so, like, just such a spectacular actor. But, you know, like, Black Widow comes out, the movie, and it's, you know, finally Natasha has her moment in the spotlight after so many years, and then the only thing that the fandom could talk about was Yelena. And very valid, she's a fantastic character, but, like, I was so excited for Natasha to have her moment in the spotlight, and it felt like all people could focus on was Yelena. And Jay Stoops just made a video recently about, like, how the difference between how Natasha was introduced and Yelena, how she was introduced, is such a clear, like, example of the growth of how Hollywood has started writing female characters, and that's amazing. But it does make me kind of sad that, like, for example, like, seeing Thunderbolts, one of the only things I can think about is, like, oh my god, I wish Natasha got this treatment. And, like, I hate to be the person that constantly compares everything to the Infinity Saga, because I want us to be able to continue the story past that. I can't help that, like, you know, Tony and Nat are the characters that I just feel such a strong connection to, and, like, my brain will always go back to them in one way or another. So yeah, calling them the Young Avengers is just, I think it's really smart. Marketing-wise, I think it's really smart. In universe, I think it's a really interesting plot. I'm just personally not ready for it yet. I don't know if I ever will be. I don't know if I will ever be okay with the fact that they are not all living in the fucking tower like a 2012 domestic Avengers fic, and Clint's in the vents, and Thor's eating Pop-Tarts, and, like, Nat can't cook, and she's doing ballet, and Steve and Tony are happily married. You know, I'm standing by it. You know what? I'm gonna speak my fucking truth. Steve Tony is my favorite ship, and is probably my favorite ship in all of fiction. And I'm not proud, but I'm also not ashamed. And I'm gonna move on. I don't feel like I'm just gonna move on. I will get into Steve Tony more in, like, the Tony-centric episode. I feel like the Marvel fandom is not a safe place to be a Steve Tony anymore. Anyways, what the fuck else was I going to talk about? Let's see. I talked about Thunderbolts. I thought it was great. Oh, I was going to talk about Black Widow. Yeah, I'm so fucking glad that there was so much Black Widow content in Thunderbolts. I love Black Widow so dearly. And again, I'm incredibly biased. I would watch Natasha Romanoff do literally anything. But it also, I mean, one thing that I have heard a lot of people say, which I do agree with, is that it felt like the second movie of a trilogy. I would have really loved more Nat backstory. I really would have loved to see her in the Red Room more, instead of just hinting and showing us little glimpses of this, like, dark past that we've heard so much about. I would have liked to see it. But looking at Black Widow for what it is a really, really great film. And I feel like a lot of people refuse to appreciate that for many reasons. Her being a woman being one of them. Her not being as sexualized in this movie being another. And also there are people who, rightfully so, myself included, were angry that it only came out after her death. With that said, it did actually give me a lot of peace of mind about her death, if that makes sense. Like, I felt like she was killed before she ever fully got to live up to her full potential as a character. But I feel like Black Widow did that. Like, the movie did that. And so I felt a lot better. And, like, we saw people mourning her. And she got so many, like, iconic action movie moments. Like, I cried many times seeing Black Widow. Every time I saw it in theaters, which was many. But one of the ones that always made me cry was just, the scene when she's in the white suit for the first time and she swings down from the helicopter and does the Black Widow landing. It's just so superhero movie. And that's a stupid thing to say because it is a superhero movie. She's only been in superhero movies. But she hadn't gotten a lot of those, like, spotlight moments for her. Or, like, there's the scene where she's, like, running away from the explosion in slow motion. And I'm like, finally, this is her moment. She gets those, like, iconic moments. And I just, like, was so proud of her as if she's, like, a real fucking person I know. I'm like, oh my god, she finally got her, her moments. That's all I have to say about Black Widow for now. I think, is incredibly underrated. And also, I don't think this is a hot take because I've seen other people say this. Dreykov is maybe the scariest Marvel villain because men like that really do exist. And look, when I say that, like, this movie was targeted, like, this movie was intended to be for women, I don't mean that men can't watch and enjoy this movie. But there is something about, Black Widow did such a beautiful job of emphasizing the fact that so many men view women as objects and things that are disposable. And the look on Nat's face when Dreykov says, like, oh, what is the fucking line? It's like, the one natural resource that the world has too much of, girls. Oh my god, that it's number one, it's so good, and number two, that is the scariest shit I've ever heard. And it's so, just in general, I will always be a bigger fan of, like, the more grounded type stuff. Like, personally, my favorite heroes are usually the ones without powers or who have very street level type stuff or are very grounded in, like, our world, as opposed to, like, I don't know, like the Guardians or like Thor, who I love and I think have fantastic movies and, like, but it's just not as much my thing as something like Iron Man or like Black Widow that's very, like, rooted in our reality. That's just normally what I tend to like better. It's just, I don't know. There's not, like, a huge reason for it. But I think that's part of why Black Widow is so fucking terrifying, is because, like, this very well could exist. Maybe not, like, the flying Red Room, maybe not, like, the one that's, like, hovering in the middle of the sky, but the rest of it could very well exist. Anyway, I think I mentioned Daredevil at some point. I thought Born Again was fantastic. Switching topics again. I will get to RDJ as Doom. Trust me. I have no idea how long these episodes are going to be. I'm aiming for, like, an hour, I think. But it might be longer than that. I thought Born Again was fucking great. Daredevil is one of my favorite shows ever. The Netflix series is so brilliant. I finally convinced my acting professor to let me do a scene from Daredevil, and I did the Karen Page scene from the pilot, the, like, interrogation room. The how long have you been practicing law scene. I got to do that, and it was so fun. Also, like, the scariest thing ever, because how do I live up to Deborah Ann Woll? I don't know. I can't. It is my dream to even be a fraction of, like, the actor that she is. She's a huge acting inspiration for me, but anyways, I thought Born Again was so well done. I don't think it was quite as good as the original series, and I can't put my finger on why. I think it's partially just because, like, I love the vibe of the trio so much, and I love, like, simply because I think I just am always going to prefer what it used to be. But I think it actually was very smart to take a fresh spin on things, to kind of give Matt a different start, have the show have slightly a different look and a slightly different feel, because it has been a long time. And what I think was really brilliant about that is that it started off it was almost like a little uneasy feeling because it was like, this feels different. And it was hard to put our finger on why. I know a lot of people were talking about like the way it was filmed or the color grading or like things like that. Or, you know, people were saying it was MCU-ified, quote unquote. But by the end of the series, no matter how hard they tried, Matt was still back to being Daredevil and Fisk was still back to being Kingpin. And I think and by the end of it, it started to have more of the Netflix vibe. And I think it was very like, it was a great way to, number one, introduce a new audience to the show. Number two, to reintroduce the show without ignoring the fact that a lot of time has passed. Because, I mean, I think it's smart to kind of acknowledge the fact that, like, your audience has grown, like, and matured and will now view the show somewhat differently and, like, not necessarily just pick up immediately where you left off. I think it's a really unique way to do it, and it honestly, they did it incredibly well. And I love the, like, theme of inevitability with that. Like, no, like, the more that Matt tries to put down the helmet, the more he realizes that he will forever be Daredevil. And same thing with Fisk. And I don't know, I think it was, every episode was so good. And I love that they really focused on, it felt more like Matt Murdock, like a Matt Murdock show than a Daredevil show. But I think that's when Daredevil's at its best. I am personally so much more invested in, like, the law, like the courtroom scenes, than I am, like, the fight scenes in Daredevil. Not that the fight scenes aren't fantastic, because they are. But, like, that's what's interesting to me. What's so interesting to me about superhero media in general is, I mean, like you know, like all art, it reflects our own lives. But, like, I think it's, the part that I find so interesting is, like, the realism side of it. Like, how these people are affected by, I think that's part of why I love Thunderbolts, is, like, it went so much into how mental health is affected by what these people go through. The government side of it I find really interesting. That's why I love Civil War. Like, how the government handles their being superheroes. And, like the realism side to, like, how this would actually operate if this was real life, I just find so fucking fascinating. Specifically with, like, government and politics. And that's part of the reason Daredevil's one of my favorites. It's also just so fucking well done. But I thought Born Again, it lived up to my expectations. Definitely. I thought it was, like, my only complaint was that I wanted more Karen, because I fucking love Karen Page. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I understand people who were a little disappointed by it because it was different from the original series. But again, I think that was actually a really smart thing to do on their part. And it only enhanced the story of, like, no matter how far they try to grow apart, no matter how far they try to grow from what they once were, they will always find their way back. And I think that was only emphasized by how different it kind of felt at first. Are those all the most recent projects? Have I been over? I talked about Cap, I talked about Daredevil, I talked about Thunderbolts. I fucking loved, what was it called? Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. That shit was great. I don't have much to say about it, other than I really enjoyed it. I don't have anything interesting to say about it, but, I thought it was really good. Oh my god, Tony showed up, and I got so excited. Okay, I think it's time. I have to talk about, I have to crack my neck really bad. Sorry, I'm gonna take, like, a 2-second break. Alright. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, shall we? I didn't even talk about Steve Rogers. I have a lot of thoughts about Steve Rogers. How the fuck did I spend 51 minutes talking about the MCU, and I have not mentioned my love-hate relationship with Steve Rogers yet? I fear I will be talking about 2 more things. Number 1, let's start with the elephant in the room. Alright, Avengers Doomsday is coming. I'm not gonna sit here and lie and say that I am not super excited by the cast that has been announced. You're telling me that I'm getting fucking Magneto back? I'm so sad. I'm so here and I'm so thrilled. I do fear that we're getting into, like, and these are just the cameos that they're announcing. I do fear that we're getting into the how do I explain this? My fear with the future of the MCU is that I feel like the writers and the directors and the people in charge don't believe in the story they're telling enough to think that it can stand on its own without relying on the nostalgia of the Infinity Saga. And that scares me. If the people making the art don't believe in the art, why should I? Or like if it feels like they don't believe that we're gonna like they don't believe it's good enough, why should I go in with an open mind? It makes me sad when I don't feel like people are putting their whole I don't feel like people are putting their whole heart into the art that they make. And obviously all, movies and TV shows and everything, it's a balance between art and business. And it makes me so upset when the business side wins. And it also, again, it just makes me sad that I feel like they don't have enough faith in the story that they're telling to rely on anything but the Iron Man nostalgia. And mind you, I am the number one person to be excited about Iron Man nostalgia. I fucking love Iron Man. They say the name Tony Stark in any movie post-Endgame, and I am kicking my feet and fucking squealing. Like, I'm not saying that I dislike it, obviously, but your story should be able to exist without it. And what worries me, like, I hope to God the actual reason that they cast RDJ as Doctor Doom is because he's a fantastic actor, which he is. And my theory and my hope is that they announced him as Doctor Doom so early so that the press around it will rely on the Iron Man nostalgia, but the story itself won't have to. Like, he can stay true to Victor Von Doom and keep the mask on, and we won't have to lift it up. We won't even have to acknowledge that it's also played by RDJ. And that's why they announced it beforehand, because it won't be a reveal in the movie. She says, praying. Because, look, I think that Tony Stark's arc was handled so fucking beautifully in the MCU. And it was done with so much care and so much love and so much nuance and detail that I feel like one wrong move and it's ruined. I honestly, as much as I miss Tony, like he is a real person, I don't want them to bring him back. Because I'm worried. Number one, his sacrifice would be in vain. Number two, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, to quote my father. I don't think he made that up, but that's where I get it from. Guys, please just let him rest. Like, okay, there are a few possibilities here. Let's go through okay, first of all, actually, I'm skipping over something very important. I saw an Instagram post. Oh shit, where'd it go? I saw an Instagram post earlier today. And mind you, let me set the scene. I am about to go eat some dinner. I hadn't eaten in a really long time. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go eat some food, and then I'm going to put my makeup on, and I'm going to set up my lighting, and I'm going to film my podcast, right? Great. That was my plan all day. Which means it should have happened. It is currently 11:30 at night. It should have happened before right now. I was also going to clean my room. That's not the point. The point is that I was having a dandy time. And then I'm scrolling on Instagram and I see this post. This post is from Movie Magic. Magic spelled Magick. I don't know who these people, like who this account is. I don't know if it's a reputable source. But what the post says is this. Robert Downey Jr. is reportedly playing 4 different characters in Avengers Doomsday. And the second photo says this. Marvel comic writer Chris Claremont revealed Robert Downey Jr. is set to play Iron Man? I'm saying Iron Man? Doctor Doom, and 2 other undisclosed roles. I have never been more scared in my life. Here are the options, right? Because what I was assuming was that he was playing Victor Von Doom, and that Victor Von Doom would possibly be a variant of Tony Stark, which I already hate. Number one, again, I hate that they feel like they have to rely on the nostalgia of Iron Man to be able to tell a story that people want to hear. I want to hear a story that you believe in and that you're passionate about. Like what Thunderbolts was. Like something that has, like, you have something that you want to say and you put so much heart and soul into saying it. That's what I want. I don't want cameo porn, for lack of a better term. But even then, I feel like it also just, I don't know a ton about Victor Von Doom. I have seen the 2005 hit film Fantastic Four. Was it 2005? Wait, did I yank 2005 out of my ass? Hold on. Fantastic Four. Did I get the year? No shot. 2005. I swear it was. I was not even 3 years old when that movie came out. And I got the year. Okay, anyways. That and like the one Ironheart run that I've read that Doom was in briefly. Hold on. Speaking of, when the hell is Marvel going to promote Ironheart? It comes out next month. It is one of my probably my most anticipated project. I fucking love Riri Williams. I'm so excited. And Marvel has not done any promo for it. And look at Dominique Thorne. Look at the cast of Fantastic Four. Tell me who got more promo. You can connect the dots. I think it's ridiculous. Anyways, I don't know much about Victor Von Doom, but I feel like it also does him a disservice by making it a Tony variant. Also, Victor should be played by someone Romani, but it's the MCU. For some reason, they just refuse to acknowledge Romani culture. But number two, again, like, just let him rest, right? So that was one option. But now I'm thinking that, that might be true, but also another version of Tony will also appear. And again, like, the first time I see this movie, and if I even hear a repulsor, I will start sobbing happy tears, and it will be like the best day of my life. But then I will see the movie again and think about it critically and realize that, like, what are we doing? If it is, and I hate to say 616 referring to the MCU, but if it is quote unquote 616 or MCU Tony taken from the past, like a different point in this timeline, and brought into Doomsday, I will go insane. Tony could barely handle learning about aliens. Poor thing. Imagine him in the multiverse with Victor Von Doom and the X-Men and Fantastic Four. I think he would have a heart attack. I don't think he could handle it. And I don't want him to ever go through that. And also, again, his arc is perfect. Don't mess with it. But then there's the possibility of them bringing in a variant, which also I feel like still has the possibility to mess with his legacy. If it's a variant, I want it to be Superior Iron Man. It didn't happen in Multiverse of Madness. I love that run so much. I want the Superior Iron Man white symbiote suit in live action. I want to see RDJ wearing it. If there's a Tony variant in this movie, I pray to God it's that one. Oh my God! And then he can team up with Captain Hydra, and then it'll be like a Steve Tony fanfiction in real life. I actually should never have another opinion. That was the most awful thing I've ever said. What do y'all know about Steve Tony Captain Hydra fix? What do y'all know about Steve Tony fix where Steve gets mind controlled by Hydra and Tony has to, like, pull him out of it? What do y'all know? Oh my God, there was a Steve Tony fic this one time where Steve and Tony are together, but then Steve gets taken by Hydra and mind controlled, and Tony also gets taken by Hydra, and Steve is forced to torture Tony. And then when Steve finally breaks through of the mind control, Tony is still traumatized by seeing Steve, and it is the most heartbreaking thing. I need to go to bed. I'm not done yet, though. This is a fucking hour long. Are you still listening? Yes, you. You who's listening right now. You're still listening to this shit? Thank you. Is an hour too long for a podcast episode? I don't know. Guys, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a short form content creator. I make videos that are 30 seconds long. This is not what I'm used to. And yet I still have so much I want to say. I might have to do, like, MCU part 2. I don't know. But for now, I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about Steve, and then I'm going to go to bed. So, and I didn't even scratch the fucking surface of the MCU. Like, I left it very open on purpose, just so I could kind of yap and see what happens, but anyways, what was I saying? Oh my god, Tony is Doom. Or, fuck, hopefully not. RDJ is Doom. No. Who are the other two people he might be playing? I didn't even mention that. Like, okay, I need you to understand. Right now, my reaction is a little bit subdued because I'm really tired. And, like, I tried having caffeine and it didn't work. You should have seen me when I first read that post. I was, like, frantically calling my friend, like, oh my god. And what, like, you know. Moral of the story. I'm hesitantly excited. I do. RDJ is a phenomenal actor. And if they are genuinely just having him be Doom for his acting, I think it will be fantastic. The Russos have made a lot of really incredible movies. And one thing that the Russos have done exceptionally well is have a lot of different characters in one film and still have it feel coherent, still have those characters' arcs feel important. Hell, Infinity War and Endgame and Civil War, honestly, are great examples of that. I'm scared. And just the fact that they're announcing so many cameos so early, the fact that they're, like, really, really emphasizing the fact that RDJ is coming back, and that being the only selling point of this movie so far, is worrying. And I'm very scared. Moving on, let's talk about Steve Tony some more. Guys, I love Steve Tony. Here's the problem. I don't like Steve Rogers that much as a character. I think I like comic Steve Rogers. I love fanfiction Steve Rogers. Is this a safe space? You know what? Yes, it is. This is my fucking room and this is my fucking podcast. I'm sorry. I'm getting so... I'm going a little insane. And I really love Steve Tony. I feel like the slow decline of my sanity throughout this podcast has been, like, I'm doing fine, but I'm getting more exhausted the more I'm hitting record. The more I'm, you know what I mean. Guys, I got up at like 7 a.m. today. That is not something I typically do. I'm getting up at 6 a.m. to see Daredevil film tomorrow. I need to go to bed. It is 11:44. Okay, anyways. Now time to, like, actually talk about somewhat, like, now time to actually talk in, like, somewhat coherent sentences that have some meaning. Listen. Steve Rogers in the MCU. I don't even know if I can tackle this in, like, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. I've made videos about it before. I think that he has the potential to be a very, very interesting character. I think that the fan base, the writers, and the other characters in the movies put him on this pedestal that he is just the perfect person who can do no wrong. And that could be really interesting if we like got into that at all. But instead, whereas Tony's arc focuses on his flaws, it never lets him live past his flaws or forget his flaws until he makes the ultimate sacrifice and some people finally realize what he's been trying to do the whole time. They never acknowledge Steve's flaws. Steve and Tony are actually very similar people in a lot of ways. Steve and Tony have a lot of the same flaws. And yet, Tony's are emphasized and Steve's are ignored. And I think Steve being put on this pedestal only does him a disservice. I think what does make him an interesting character and what would make him a more interesting character is if you explore those flaws and explore what it means to be a flawed person who is on this pedestal and how he views himself in that lens. And, like, there's so much that is so interesting to do there. And yet they don't. They refuse to... And Captain America Civil War, being Captain America Civil War, is the biggest disservice to that story you could have done. And I'm not going to get into my thoughts on the Accords right now. I think we all know whose team I'm on. In the MCU specifically. Comics, Civil War is very different. But I think setting it up so Steve is the winner from the beginning not only is a disservice to Tony's character, it's a disservice to Steve's. Because I think that the lesson he needed to learn in Civil War is, despite the fact that in the past he has always been in the right, and mind you, he was in these very black and white situations. Obviously, although a lot of people in our current political climate can't recognize it, Nazis are bad. And fighting the Nazis is good. You know, him being in World War II, it was not a very black and white... I'm sorry, it was not a very... It was not a situation that could be viewed from many angles. There was a very clear right and wrong, right? Or the Avengers fighting Loki. While we can empathize with Loki, and he's a fantastic character, him killing people is bad. And being a dictator is bad. And fighting that is good. You know, Steve has been through all of these scenarios that it is very clear to see the right from wrong. And therefore, it is understandable that he doesn't know how to see situations any differently. That's all he's ever known. And hell, even before he was Captain America, it was very, you know, his mindset, which I love, which is, I don't like bullies, I don't care where they're from. But it's a very black and white mindset. There is good and there is bad. And I think when it came down to something like Civil War, which is a very layered issue, and what I think the movie did very well is show us the different mindsets that they both have and why both of them are valid and justified in their own right. Steve doesn't understand how to take a step back and realize that despite the fact that he has good intentions, he might not be 100% in the right. And the fact that even though he is fighting the good fight, he might have caused damage along the way. And he is not able to recognize when he might be in the wrong. Whereas Tony, who has been explicitly told his whole life that he's not good enough by so many people in his life, been betrayed by so many people that he has trusted and been made to believe that it's his own fault, and constantly has been made to believe that he is doing the wrong thing. Although he might not always be able to quickly admit it, he is able to recognize when he's wrong. And that's what his whole arc is. It's recognizing that it's wrong and overcorrecting, trying to make up for that. You know, he was pouring so much of himself into being Iron Man that he tried to overcorrect by creating Ultron so that he could step away from the fight. And we all saw how that worked out. Or, you know, he's tried so hard to protect people that he ended up creating another weapon of mass destruction. And, like, that's why his arc is so interesting to me, is because every time he tries to do the right thing, he ends up going to the other extreme and doing, like, something almost worse. And because of that, he's able to be like, oh shit, I'm in the wrong, what can I do to change this? Whereas Steve doesn't know how to do that. Because he's always been told that he's right, and he's always been made to feel that he's right, and he always has been right in these situations. Like, it's not, like, low-key, if I were Steve, I would think I was always right too. Because look at the situations he's dealt with, you know, like I was saying. Whereas, okay, the lesson that he needed to learn is that he might have to take a step back and learn to see things from other people's perspectives. Instead, the lesson that they kept, you know, hammering is not the right verb, that they kept shoving down our throats, let's say it that way, was what Sharon Carter had to say. Right when Steve was so close. He could have had this really interesting arc and acknowledged that he had flaws and learned how to deal with that, and it could have been really layered and interesting. And instead, what Sharon told him was, I don't remember the exact quote, but it's like, when people try to tell you you're wrong, when people try to tell you to move, plant yourself like a tree and tell them no, you move. Sharon, that's the opposite of what he needs to hear right now. He knows how to stand up for what he believes in. That's one of the very admirable things that I love about Steve Rogers. That's not the lesson he's got to learn right now. What we could explore is how to hear other people when they say move and think, maybe other people have a point sometimes. But no, we had to stick with the same damn plot we've been doing in every damn movie, which is that Steve Rogers is right and everyone else is wrong. And that includes Tony Stark, God forbid. Can you tell that I'm a little biased here? But no, I genuinely do think it is so much more interesting when a character is flawed, because that makes them real and that makes them human. And Steve Rogers does have flaws. They just don't they just don't explore them. And I think that is so boring. And I think Steve Rogers has so much more to him than that. And you know how I know that? Because I log on to archiveofourown.org or .com or whatever the fuck it is, and I look up Steve Rogers x Tony Stark, hurt comfort, canon compliant, fucking, angst happy ending. And I read the people who understand Steve's character and understand the nuance that's there and understand the parallels between him and Tony, while also understanding how they are opposite sides of that same coin, and write him as the loving artist, optimist that he is, who's trying to see the good in a world that keeps failing him, and is understanding that, being America's golden boy is not actually who he is, and how he deals with that, and how he deals with the image that he's created for himself, and who he actually is as a person, and how he continues to rebel against this government, not because he's always in the right, but because he's trying to figure out how the world that he had so much faith in, and how the government and the country that he had so much faith in are not actually what he always believed they were. That's where Steve Rogers is interesting. What does the MCU do with that? Nothing. The MCU says, no, I'm going to leave all of my friends, and I'm going to leave Tony, I'm going to leave Bucky, and I'm going to go back to I'm going to go back to the character I was when we first met me. And I'm never going to be wrong, and I'm never going to admit that I'm wrong, and that's fine because I'm Chris Evans and I'm hot. The last part I do stand by. The last part I do agree with. So that's, I think, where I have to stop. Because if I keep going, I will never stop. I think that's my first podcast episode. What the fuck? I don't remember what I just talked about. I feel like it was a bunch of nonsense. And I'm going to lean into that because I'm learning to be less of a perfectionist, and I'm learning that that is okay, and that is why I am doing this podcast, so I can be okay with imperfect things. Hopefully there are at least a few clips I can use in there for TikTok. Because I need the content, y'all. I really do. I will talk about more than Marvel, I swear. Some of the other topics I have in mind, I think I already mentioned I'm going to do a Once Upon a Time episode that will probably be next, because I'm currently rewatching it. I eventually do want to bring guests onto this podcast. I want to establish this as kind of a solo podcast first, but I kind of lied earlier. This is not the first episode I've ever filmed. I have filmed an episode. This will be the first episode I edit and put out there, but I have filmed an episode with a guest because my friend was here visiting and I didn't know the next time I would see him. And we talked for a very long time. I did have to split it into 2 episodes about the Disney parks. So that will be coming eventually. Let's see, what else? I will probably do a Star Wars centered episode. I will probably, did I mention that I wanted to talk about the Hunger Games? That will probably happen. No, that will happen. I just don't know when. I'm going to do an episode where I just talk about the cosplay community and my experience with that in general. And I'll talk about whatever oh my god, I'm going to do a Toy Story episode and I'm really excited about it. And before you say, how can you talk about Toy Story for an hour? Watch me. You're going to hear me do it and you will like it. I don't know why that was a threat. But yeah, I'm very excited to get started with this. I hope this is content that you guys enjoy. I'm very excited to see where this leads. I have no idea whether this will be a weekly thing or a once a month thing or a whenever I remember I have a podcast thing. But I'm going to try this new thing where I'm chill about the stuff that I'm making. as opposed to letting it consume my entire life. So this will simply be when I have something I want to talk about, I'm going to turn the microphone on, the camera on, and see what happens. And I'm very excited. And I really appreciate anyone who was here listening to this and who wants to hear me talk about the things that I love. That genuinely means a lot to me. And yeah, that's the first episode. Thank you so much for listening or for watching. And I will see you next time.